I'll see thy face. When I awake, I will see thy light. When I awake, I'll see thy face. When I awake, I will see thy light. Mother, awake me from my dreams. When I awake, I'll see thy face. When I awake, I will see thy light. When I awake, I'll see thy face. When I awake, I will see thy light. Mother, awake me from my dreams. Mother, awake me in thy light. Hand in hand we're dancing together in thy light. Mother, awake me from my dream. Mother, awake me in thy light. Hand in hand we're dancing together in thy light. Good afternoon, friends. It's time for Whispers from Eternity by Paramahansa Yogananda. My name is Nayaswami Hriman, but you already know that. And I'm speaking to you live from Ananda Community in beautiful downtown Linwood, which is neither downtown nor beautiful. Okay, so we're on number 208. We're coming near the end of the book, and so we have some big plans for after Whispers from Eternity, but I'm not allowed to disclose those plans right at this moment. Number 208, thou didst reveal thy silver rays of speaking silence. The axiom, speech is silver, but silence is golden. Okay, so Paramahansa Yogananda writes, addressing God as the Blessed Divine Mother. Divine Mother, I heard thy voice in the speaking fragrance of the rose. I heard thy voice in the lisping whispers of my own devotion. I heard thy voice beneath the din of my noisiest thoughts. It was thy love that spoke through the voice of friendship. I touched thy tenderness in the softness of the lily. O Divine Mother, break through the dawn and show thy face of light. Break through the sun and show thy face of power. Break through the night and show thy mooned face. Break through my thoughts and show thy face of wisdom. Break through my feelings and show thy face of love. Break through my pride and show thy face of humbleness. Break through my wisdom and show thy face of perfection. As I called to thee in the wilderness of my loneliness, thou didst burst through the dawn to greet me with thy joy. Thou didst emerge from the molten door of the sun to invigorate me through the pores of my life. Thou didst tear away the night of my ignorance to reveal thy silver rays of speaking silence. This, of course, is very poetic, but also in the Bhagavad Gita, the beloved scripture of India, and that we yogis love to read and quote and draw inspiration from. No phone calls right now, thank you. We see that frequent, even constant poetic reference to God, whether as Divine Mother or Father. We see that reference constantly in the reference to all perception, to all perceived objects, whether it be the moon in nature, the sun, the stars, the water, or in all beings. It's axiomatic. It's a basic statement of metaphysics and of Advaita Vedanta philosophy and the metaphysical tradition, the spiritual tradition, East and West, that the divine lies hidden, masked, if you will, by the forms which it has adopted. The infinite variety and diversity of creation is but a play, a Leela of God, Father, Mother, Beloved. And so I've been thinking when I read this earlier, there was a reference to loneliness. And of course, that's been isolation producing loneliness, has been something experienced by millions of people during this last 12 months or so, 9 months, whatever it's been. And it made me think a little bit about, well, here we have, this beautiful poem in which he talks about Divine Mother as behind one's thoughts, Divine Mother as the voice of friendship, Divine Mother as the softness in a flower, the fragrance in a rose, in the sun and the moon, all these things. And for him, for Yogananda, for a saint, that's a realization, not simply an affirmation. For us reading it, it's, let's face it, more of an affirmation. How do we bridge then the impenetrable, seemingly impenetrable veil behind which lies this Divine Mother, this divinity in all things? And so it made me think, well, loneliness. What I just picked that one. Someone feeling lonely, abandoned, and many people say, I'd like to be married or have a partner or a spouse or a companion, whatever. And the real companion is that indwelling divinity, whether as mother, father, or friend, or beloved. But how do we realize that? How do we get to the point of such a refined, calm, uplifted consciousness that presence becomes a reality, not just an affirmation? Well, that's no easy task. Well, it's simple, but it isn't easy. Simple, meaning we have to want that friendship. God is very shy, Yogananda said, and very humble, hides behind the mask of the universe, of the creation, of all objects, behind the mask of even our delusions. So how do we unmask that divinity within us? Well, that's the response to that, the quote answer to that, is a combination of self-effort and grace. We have to make the first steps to reach up. When we reach up 2 hands to God, God reaches down a hand to lift us. God is shy, God is humble. And the one thing God doesn't have is our attention, our interest, our love. It would be unreasonable to expect our love, not having met God. But nonetheless, our attention, we can start with our interest, with our attention. And where does that interest and attention start with? Well, to be quite honest, unfortunately, it starts with either we're in the depths of our lowest point, or we're on the top slag heap of success. Either way, there's no way out. In fact, it could be said that you don't really reach for God until you've conquered the world. Well, I don't fully believe that, but I've heard it said, and I can understand why. Because if you're down in the dumps and everything's been taken from you, you've been a miserable failure at everything. You're left with unrequited love. You're left with unfulfilled desire. You wanted to be successful. You wanted to be loved. You wanted to be rich. You wanted to be healthy. All that stuff. Okay, you wanted a Porsche or a Lamborghini or Miss America or something. And so, do you turn your back on those things and look for God alone? Yeah, you could. You definitely could. But then left in the seed of the matrix of your consciousness is this unfulfilled desire. And so you're going to have to deal with that. Chicken's going to come home to roost at some point. Okay. That's why it's also could be said that until you reach the pinnacle of everything your heart desires, however delusive, that you finally turn your back on it because you realize for a fact that it couldn't satisfy you. Whereas when it's, when you're disappointed and thwarted in your desires, you haven't realized it at all. You've just been thwarted and frustrated. You see the difference? Now, what happens, however, is that all fulfillment takes place in soul consciousness, in God. And so if down in the dumps, we turn our back on the dumps and seek God, as many people do, I mean, think of the whole 12-step recovery and addiction, then as we work our way up through prayer, meditation, service, in other words, we apply our willpower to live rightly, to live righteously, to live by the golden rule, the 10 commandments, the yamas and niyamas. And as we rise spiritually, we begin to gain power, literally, over ourselves, but that also means the magnetism to draw to us other things. And so what happens spiritually is that those old desires, I'm talking over, let's face it, more than one lifetime, but in most cases. And so as our magnetism grows, those old desires, those chickens do come home to roost, and we have to face them, like Jesus being tempted by the devil in his 40 days seclusion and fast, you see. Now, well, I don't want to, Jesus didn't need that temptation in the sense that I'm talking about particularly. He did it for us in some respects, and it's even drama to be tempted, so he went through it too. He wasn't just a magic puppet or something, but nonetheless, he wasn't quite as compelled as we are in overcoming our delusions and desires. And so as we rise spiritually, we have the power to fulfill those things. And thus it is, spiritually speaking, you have people who fall spiritually, who get tempted. You see this among spiritual teachers only because their lives are so public and their temptations tend to be publicized as a consequence. But nonetheless, even saints in the corner of the room, as it were, do get tempted. Lead us not into temptation. It's our karma that leads us into temptation to test our spiritual strength, our spiritual muscles. And so you see, we have to put out the effort. And as we grow, the realization that it's all, I remember there was a phrase from Padre Pio, this one movie that I really love. He whispers to his friend, whose name I suddenly forgot. It's right there on the tip of my tongue somewhere. And it begins with an A. Augusta. Anyway, he says to his friend, in a whisper, he says, it's all lies. It's all sin, he says. And what he means is it's all a delusion. Even the good things of life are but a mask over the indwelling divinity, you see. And so for us to actually have a realization of that divine mother behind the moon and the sun and behind our noisy thoughts, as it says here, that's well, it's a good phrase, isn't it? Our noisy thoughts. Behind all of that, then the realization of that comes through the combination of the self-effort that we make to refine our behavior in an unselfish direction, in the golden rule, but also this is the great gift of meditation that accelerates that refinement. Because as we concentrate our mind, because it's all in the mind, right? You could catch tempting thoughts as they percolate through the mind first, then you wouldn't have to deal with them outwardly, but almost nobody does. But meditation can give you such a mindfulness, such an awareness of your thoughts, that you can begin to have that ability to catch those thoughts. Nonetheless, there are past desires. Every desire has to be dealt with on some level or another. And so karmic bombs do happen. Just people of great spiritual power and magnetism and great nobility of character. Suddenly, it's like they're just knocked on the shins with a lead pipe and just brought to their knees by some karmic bomb they didn't see coming. It says in the Bhagavad Gita that even the wise are compelled by desire and especially anger. I don't have time to get into that. I'm in overtime already. But what I'm saying is that the refinement of consciousness that can actually realize divinity behind its myriad forms has to come through the refinement of our consciousness by the work that we do to overcome the crudity, which is so popular nowadays, the crudity and sort of lower chakra language and consciousness and gutter language and so forth that seems to be so prevalent. The materialism of the culture in which we live. And so by being charitable, both in mind and thought, as well as in gift giving, helping others, we need to refine our selfish tendencies, our ego active tendencies, our restless tendencies towards the blue, pure blue skies, which are always up there at 30,000 feet, my friends at Boeing tell me, here in the Northwest where it's often cloudy. So let's make that, let's be long distance runners on this. And let's see the big picture. Let's calm ourselves through meditation, refine ourselves through good thoughts and thinking of the needs of others. Okay, folks, I'm definitely in overtime. I'm probably get my pink slip any day now. So besides, I got a meeting to go to. All right, great souls. You heard it. You heard it. Now you got to do it. Okay, I'm going to do the countdown and say sayonara, arrivederci, ciao, hasta luego, baby. My favorite is adios. Go with God. Go with God. Stay with God. Be with God. Here we go.